welcome to this edition of Border Report Live. My name is Rudy Mideles, your host here in Harlingen, Texas, in the Rio Grande Valley of Deep South Texas. Got an incredible program lined up for you today. Our San Diego correspondent Salvador Rivera and our El Paso correspondent Ilan Katz are going to be speaking with attorney Ilan Katz about the legal and political implications of those strikes on alleged narco-terrorists from Venezuela that we have been telling you about. So looking forward to that conversation coming up in just a few moments. But first, let's take a look at some of the headlines making news across the border, starting with the soybean trade crisis that's currently happening. Now, soybean farmers and farm workers are facing crisis now that their biggest customer, China, has halted soybean trading with the U.S. Now, you may remember this current crisis was set off actually back in February. That's when President Donald Trump had announced tariffs on China, and China immediately retaliating by halting trade with American soybean farmers. Just for a little context, up on your screen right now, the American Soybean Association says that China buys most of the world's soybeans and the U.S. grows most of the soybeans bought by China until this year. Let's take a look at another chart, though. You know, I love my data. Now, this one shows U.S. soybean exports to China, Mexico, the European Union combined only buy about 20% of those soybean exports from our country. But China was already on track to phase out U.S. soybeans. This graph from the American Soybean Association shows that a trade war with China during Trump's first term actually resulted in a shift from our soybeans here in America over to Brazilian soybeans. Staying on the topic of economics and specifically trade and tariffs, Mexico's president, Claudia Sheinbaum, says she wants to equalize trade deficits with countries who sell more to Mexico than they actually buy. And of course, we were just talking about them, China is at the top of that list. The president said she wants to double tariffs on countries like China and others who send lots of imports to Mexico. And that would include products like automotive parts, that's a big one, textiles, plastics, steel, and aluminum. But she insists that these tariffs are only about evening trade deficits.
No, we export very little to those countries. Mostly we import. And it's not for all that they export to us with low tariffs. It's only for certain industries we believe we need to improve our economy. It is important for everyone to know, including China and the other countries we are putting tariffs on, that we have nothing against them. On the contrary, we admire them.
Now, according to reporting from our Julian Resendez right here at Border Report on borderreport.com, Chinese companies have exported about $51.4 billion to Mexico, while Mexican entrepreneurs have shipped $3.83 billion to China. Of course, we're going to keep you updated with the ongoing changes in trade and tariffs, both on Border Report Live and on borderreport.com. And that is a look at the headlines making news across the border. When we come back, though, Salvador Rivera and Julian Resendez are going to be talking about the escalating situation, between the U.S. and Venezuela. Mexico City-based criminal defense attorney Ilan Katz is going to help us understand what's at stake legally. Stay with us. Border Report Live is back in 1 minute. Welcome back to this edition of Border Report Live. My name is Rudy Mideles, and I'm your host here in Harlingen, Texas, in the Rio Grande Valley of South Texas. Time now to bring in everyone. We've got a full house on today's edition of Border Report. Joining me now, San Diego correspondent Salvador Rivera, El Paso correspondent Julian Resendez, and our guest for today's conversation, Mr. Ilan Katz, a criminal defense attorney, here to talk to us today about the rising tensions and the legality and political impact of these rising tensions with Venezuela as President Donald Trump looks to curb illegal drug trade coming from that country. Thank you all so much for being here today.
Thank you.
And I'll let you, Salvador, go ahead and kick it all off for us.
Rudy, well, this, as you know, is about a couple of strikes, at least that we know of. President Trump had alluded to the fact that there might have been a third attack on another boat somewhere in the Caribbean Atlantic Ocean. I know the first one took place on a boat that apparently had left Trinidad Tobago and was in international waters. There are stories that it appeared to be on making a U-turn when it exploded, attacked by military forces. An action proposed and promoted and cleared by the White House. This is video you see of that was released by President Trump's Truth Social media account. It shows one of the boats trying to get away or on the water before it was attacked and blown up by U.S. forces. We heard of a second attack just a few days ago. President Trump saying that this is necessary to get rid of, quote, violent drug trafficking cartels. And again, the video that you're seeing, the images that you're seeing was posted by President Trump on his social media account. He has said that these are cartel is Tren de Aragua. He's also accusing the Venezuelan government of being behind some of this drug running, being people who are bringing this quote unquote poison into the United States, hurting the U.S. cities and people, killing people here in the United States. Now, of course, I'm going to introduce someone who knows a lot more about this stuff than I do, and this is Attorney Ilan Katz, who is based in Mexico City. Sir, welcome to our live stream, Border Report live stream. Thank you for joining us. Please shed some light, your thoughts, your opinions on what we have been seeing out in the Atlantic Ocean as the White House apparently is targeting this so-called drug-running boats and cartels that are exporting drugs into the United States.
Thank you, Rudy. Thank you, Salvador. Thank you, Julian. It's a pleasure to be here with you guys talking about this very interesting subject. First of all, we have to bear in mind that at the very least, it seems excessive to bomb or destroy or kill the people on these boats for many reasons. First of all, the United States has always had the legal framework to stop drugs from coming illegally into the country and to detain the drug runners or the smugglers in those vehicles or operating illegally in this way. Then came this shift by which many different cartels, including Tren de Aragua in Venezuela, became designated or was designated a terrorist organization. And this changed the treatment, where they would be treated instead as of just regular criminals bringing drugs in, they would be treated as Al-Qaeda or as terrorists who were an imminent threat to the United States. So it's a little bit difficult to make the shift from somebody bringing in a bomb, per se, to somebody bringing in fentanyl or cocaine. So there's a big difference there. There's a line to be drawn. They could have just stopped the boat and arrested the people if there were, drug runners or smugglers on that boat. But I want to take it a step further. There is, at this point in time, no real evidence that proves that these people belong to the Tren de Aragua cartel, which would give it at least some legal framework for it to be legal under U.S. law, even though it would still be illegal under international law. Since we don't know if these people are Tren de Aragua, except because of what the White House has said, then it does become a more slippery slope regarding the legality of these executions.
How is this playing in Mexico and other Latin American countries?
Well, that's a very complicated question to answer because, first of all, we have seen that Colombia and Venezuela have been very tough on this action, and because it does, at the very face of it, seem like a very excessive. It would seem like the United States is very trigger happy to have military action and destroy anybody who they seem to be, a smuggler. And it does have questions regarding sovereignty and human rights. On the other hand, in Mexico is very, or at least the average Mexican citizen, I'm sure, is very happy to see some strong-armed responses to the cartels who have been plaguing our society for many years in a very bad way. But it is worth mentioning that Claudia Sheinbaum, our president, Omar Garcia Harfuch, our top cop, have been very aggressive during this presidency in attacking, detaining, and deporting drug smugglers and seizing huge quantities of drugs. So Mexico is doing its best to fight the drug trade. It's doing the best to fight illegality in all shapes and forms. And the Mexican citizen, I'm sure, is happy to see any efforts against drug runners.
Along those lines, Mr. Katz, as far as Mexico's response, nobody's questioning Mexico's response. We have seen drug lords twice, a large number of drug lords being sent to the U.S. But along those lines, would Ms. Sheinbaum be doing this if the Trump White House had not strong-armed her government through the threat of tariffs and through very strong dialogue?
I think it's a yes and no answer. Yes, because we have seen that when Claudia Sheinbaum was mayor of Mexico City and Omar Garcia Harfuch was the chief of police of Mexico City, they were very effective in fighting crime. Their track record has been very effective. But I'm sure that the that the current administration's emphasis on this has hypercharged this in a very positive way for both Mexico and the United States, because we are seeing that this has taken a priority and we are seeing very good results on both sides of the border, but especially in Mexico, which went from a mediocre results to excellent results on the federal government side in fighting drugs.
Now, President Trump has promised more strikes both on the water and on land. How do you perceive these potential strikes on foreign soil, for that matter?
Well, I think the starting point is the human rights violations. I mean, we have to see what's the end game. And I don't think that we are being told by the U.S. government in an eloquent and orderly way what's the end game here and what's the strategy here to stop illegal drugs from going to the United States. Because I understand that it's very, very important to fight fentanyl. Nobody's arguing that. The United States has a right to stop the flow of fentanyl, and it has a right to protect its borders, and has a right to defend American citizens. That's not being argued here. That's not the point. The point is at what cost? If this is going to be done, destroying or trampling over human rights all over the region, then you're fighting, the cure is worse than the disease. If we are going to get innocent humans murdered by, military action in order to stop the flow of fentanyl, then the equation is a losing equation for mankind.
Now, President Sheinbaum has said that she will not stand for any military intervention in Mexico. But how about covert activities? You think she will support this, or other countries in Latin America? What are we going to see commandos going into the Venezuelan jungles to keep this stuff from flowing north? What do you see taking place here in the coming months?
Well, Venezuela and Mexico are two very, very different scenarios. So let me answer regarding Mexico, and then I'll answer regarding Venezuela. Mexico and the United States have been wonderful partners in fighting illegality, especially in this administration. But historically, we have been collaborating to stop the flow of drugs. What will be the consequences of the escalation? We don't know. But I don't see active, feet on the ground United States soldiers in Mexico. I see more cooperation, more technical or more information being shared, and better results, not soldiers. Venezuela is a hugely different situation, because if the United States wants to have a regime change in Venezuela, then it's highly probable that this will be one of the reasons, or the reason, not to call it a reason and not an excuse, just saying a reason to go in. And I do think that we will see an escalation in Venezuela as time passes and time progresses.
We used to say that pretty much all the drugs exported from Mexico or through Mexico were bound for the United States. But it's no secret that Mexico cities like Tijuana have a huge epidemic, a crisis when it comes to people ODing on the stuff, being addicted with drugs. You think this is also a need to intervene and put a stop to it because this is finally truly affecting a lot of families, a lot of people in Mexico?
Yes, absolutely. One of the consequences of having stronger borders is that you will have more drugs on this side of the border. You will have, if you keep having an uptick in production and that is stopped at the border, then you will have more Mexican addicts consuming the drugs. It's a simple equation. The more drugs you have, the more addicts you'll have, the more consumption you'll have. So the name of the game is containment. The more you stop the production and the flow of drugs, the less addicts you will have and the less overdoses you will have. I do think that, on the other hand, we are seeing a huge increase in seizures in Mexico, and that will also help stop the epidemic. The main point has to be to stop not only the transportation, but also the production of the drugs.
We are speaking with the criminal defense attorney based out of Mexico City, Ilan Katz, on the legal and political implications of strikes on alleged narco-terrorists from Venezuela. We have to take a very quick break, but we're going to continue this conversation after the break. So stay with us. Border Report Live is back in 1 minute. And welcome back to this full house edition of Border Report Live. My name is Rudy Midelis, your host here in Harlingen, Texas. And joining us today for this conversation is Mr. Ilan Katz, criminal defense attorney, to speak about the legal and political implications on these strikes on alleged narco-terrorists coming from Venezuela.
I have a question for you, Mr. Katz, on something that's very dear, very close to those of us who live on the border, who have family on the other side of the border. And you touched on the increasing consumption of drugs and trafficking of drugs on the Mexican side. Now, my question is, do you see Mexican society, the Mexican government, putting a stronger emphasis on both preventing the trafficking of the drugs, the presence of the drugs on the Mexican side of the border, and also combating addictions? Because, from experience here reporting on the border, drug addicts don't just spring out of the ground. A drug addict becomes a drug addict because there's a supply and somebody approaches him or her offering drugs, sometimes even giving away the drugs the first time just to get him hooked. How do you see how this is playing out on the Mexican side of border cities?
Well, first of all, I think that there has been a lapse in a sane policy, both on both sides of the border, regarding the treatment of addicts. I think that the treatment of addicts is a huge part of any holistic drug program in either country or anywhere in the world. I think that that's a very important point. And I think that there has to be an increase in at least the exploration of these solutions to treat people on the border. But there are two different problems on the border. One of the problems, which is a higher problem, is the amount of violence that comes with the drug trade. We have seen very, very high numbers in the last 12 to 13 years in Mexico regarding violent deaths between fights with the cartels, which are far higher than the numbers regarding overdoses in Mexico, which I think should take a back seat to the violence that is happening continuously in Mexico, especially at the border, especially in Tamaulipas, where we have seen this situation get out of control. So that's a very, very important part of the equation. Another part of the equation is that the more we see high-level drug lords being sent to the United States, the more we see that the capacity of operation is going to be minimized because their hideouts are being discovered, Their operators are being detained. Their money laundering schemes are being limited. So the drug war does have serious implications to downgrade the amount of, or at least to contain the damage on the border and everywhere else.
Let me follow up to that question. We keep talking about addicts, but I keep going back. Addicts don't just spring out of the ground. Addicts are the result of a large presence of drugs, of somebody not in society, in government, not stepping in and saying, well, there shouldn't be sales of drugs on the streets. We need to talk to the families. Here, growing up in El Paso back in the early 80s, we had a tremendous gang problem and somewhat of a drug problem. And people, unlike in some sectors of law enforcement in Mexico that I hear, we're not saying, well, it's just a problem among drug traffickers. Let them do their thing. And on the contrary, people here in El Paso and Southern New Mexico stepped in. They involve the schools. They involve nonprofit groups. They involve parents. When can we expect to see this type of societal action in Mexico to prevent the development of drug addicts, ordinary kids just going down that path?
Well, first of all, you're right. You're absolutely right. That is a major problem. But let me explain the challenge. The streets, as we understand them, every corner, every alley in Mexico is looked upon or taken care of by local police, municipal police. And municipal police tend to be the least funded and the most corrupt. So we are giving this huge task to the people who are less prepared to do it. We need the federal government to get involved on cleaning up the streets in Mexico. And I think that would be a very, very positive change in the policy regarding how to keep kids off drugs and people off drugs. As long as we keep relying on municipal police to do this, we're going to be fighting an uphill battle.
Mr. Katz, thank you again for being with us. And I'm really happy that you decided to join us to share your expertise and your knowledge. I wanted to ask you something else. As we approach President Sheinbaum's first year in office, how do you grade her out, not just on drugs, immigration, but overall as president of Mexico?
Well, there are many, many places or many areas where she's doing a fantastic job, I mean, first of all, I always like to say that she's very, very smart and she's very objective. But one of her major virtues is that she has always had the capacity to administrate powerful men. And in this case, Trump is the powerful man. So she has been giving what is elemental in our relationship and our bilateral relationship to get things done well. I always say that Mexico and the United States are more than neighbors. We're lovers. So we have to tread this relationship very, very carefully. There are other things where we'll have to see how it plays out. I worry about the judicial reform. I'm optimistic that it will play out well, but there's going to be a curve regarding the judicial reform. I'm very worried about the reform of the Amparo law, which seems to give more power to the government and less rights to the individual. So we do have to protect things regarding legality. And I think that she has to give more than she takes on that ground. We can't have a powerful, good country without having good rights or powerful rights for the citizens. But on the economy, on security, on our foreign affairs, she gets an A+ from me so far.
Oh, A+, that's pretty good. You foresee she'll continue with this success, in your opinion?
Well, there are a lot of things in play, of course, and nobody can predict the future, but she has been tremendously effective and very, very smart in how to proceed. So I do think that we will have a good president. I like her, I think that she represents the best that the party had to offer, or some of the best people that the party had to offer. And as long as she can shake off some of the bad elements in her party, then she will continue to do very well.
We've been speaking with criminal defense attorney out of Mexico City, Mr. Ilan Katz, about the legal and political implications of strikes on alleged narco-terrorists coming in from Venezuela, as well as, a little bit of the foreign policy between the United States and Mexico. We want to thank you so much, but we are unfortunately out of time, Mr. Katz, but we appreciate you joining us today and hope we can call again on you in the future.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you, sir. And thank you, Salvador and Julian, for your incredible reporting as always. Really quick, before we go, we wanted to remind you that you can stay informed on the stories shaping the U.S.-Mexico border on your commute home. Maybe you're walking the dog, taking the kid out in the stroller. That's what I'm doing every night these days. But we are now bringing you Border Report Live, real-time updates, expert insights, and voices from both sides of the border in podcast form. You can listen today. You can see all the places you can get it right there at the bottom of your screen. Apple Podcasts, the iHeartRadio app, Spotify, and of course on YouTube as well. Again, thank you to Mr. Ilan Katz for speaking with us today. We appreciate you making the time for us today, sir. And thank you to our San Diego correspondent, Salvador Rivera, and our El Paso correspondent, Julian Resendez, for their incredible questions on this subject. My name is Rudy Mireles. For the rest of the Border Report Live crew, have a great day.